Let's get started. Satya, all yours.
All right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to OpenCV Weekly webinar. I'm Satya Malik, the CEO of OpenCV.org. And today we have a very special guest who has been on the show a few times. I want to welcome Katherine Scott, who is the developer advocate at Open Robotics. And today she's going to give us all the great things that happened at ROSCon 2022. Many different things to talk about. But before that, let's also welcome Phil Nelson, who is the Director of Content and Creative at OpenCV.org. He puts this show together, and if anything goes wrong, it's his fault. I always like to say that if you did not actually, if you had actually used your title as Director of Content, just Director of Content, then we would have two docs on the show.
Yeah, we could have been the two doctors. One more thing that I screwed up. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to OpenCV Weekly once again. I am your co-host with the co-most, the second banana who is second to none. I am also your plus one and only. It's Mr. Nelson if you're nasty, but you can call me Phil. And I'm here to remind you of a few things we do every single week here on OpenCV Weekly. The first of which is a giveaway to you in the audience. Stay tuned for later in the episode where I'll be asking a trivia question based on our presentation. You'll get the chance to win the OpenCV course of your choosing. You can see what courses are available by going to opencv.org/courses or pick up another course just because, they're cool and good. We're also doing Q&A with you in the audience. Please use the Zoom Q&A button at the bottom of the screen or the chat system wherever you're watching us, Zoom, Twitch, Twitter, etc., to ask your question at any point during the webinar, and we will do our best to get to it in the flow of conversation. We'll also try to save some time at the end of the episode so we can answer questions we didn't get to. That is about it. Back to you, Satya.
Yeah, welcome, Kat. Please introduce yourself, and then let's get started with all the good stuff that happened in ROSCon.
Yeah. So I'm Katherine Scott. I'm actually now technically the developer advocate at Intrinsic, because
That's right.
Intrinsic purchased the basically commercial arm of Open Robotics, but effectively for most of us, our jobs don't change day to day. So definitely doing stuff for ROS and Gazebo and OpenRMF on the regular. So nothing's really changed. I'll still be at ROSCon. So ROSCon was roughly, what was it? It was October 23rd, I want to say, of last year. So we were trying to do this earlier in the year, and just because a bunch of stuff going on, didn't quite make it. But this was the first in-person ROSCon in 3 years, and it was kind of crazy because we decided to go for it and have it in Kyoto.
Oh,
and we were
very cool.
Well, in Japan, things were, they weren't really allowing that many foreign visitors during most of COVID, and then it became like a very complicated visa process, which gave, to be honest, it was a very complicated visa process, and it was like, oh my, this is what everyone else goes through on a regular basis. I didn't realize it was that bad, but they opened it up for general travel about a week before ROSCon, so it was really crazy to come in and see the whole country right as it was opening up. And with all that, we were just, when we were putting together the event, we were terrified, like, oh my God, are people going to be able to come, or are we even going to have an event? And then they opened it up the week before, and we all just piled in, and it was nuts. It was awesome.
I'm always curious, does the attendance actually increase if it is outside the United States? Because people can convince their bosses or to fund the trip, but if it is happening in somewhere in US they have always been to, maybe they are not interested, or actually it's more difficult to get more people outside the US.
That's really hard. I think in domestically, at least when I've been a graduate student, worked other places, it was like, oh, if you're doing something domestically, yeah, sure, it's going to be a cheap flight. When you leave the country, it's like, oh, well, you better be presenting or have a really strong case for it. On the flip side, though, just due to visas and stuff like that, I think, it makes it easier for certain groups of people to travel and see you. So,
Got it.
Might be a
while. I'm assuming that ROSCon, most of the people are not students; they are from the industry. Is that incorrect, or?
It's a really good mix. I don't know if we collected data this year, but it's a little bit of everything, really. It's like students, it's like small startups, big companies, just individuals that are contractors. It's really a crazy mix. Okay. Yeah, so this is sort of the overview shot. I don't even know if this is everyone because this is the last session of the day. You know, certain people I'm sure have already taken off and went out to explore Kyoto, but we had just an absurd number of people, and ROSCon just grows and grows and grows every year. Um, you know, like I said, the COVID restrictions lifted the week before we got there, so we were worried that people weren't going to show up. We actually sold out. We hit 100
Wow.
or 800 attendees, which
Wow.
we were we were worried if we'd even get half of that. And it was, you know, people really did turn out for it. I think people were excited by the location as well. 38 countries. Just the workshops alone, the first day, we had, you know, almost 450 people at the workshops, you know, 18 diversity scholars. Diversity scholars come from, I want to say, they're probably 18 of those 38 countries because they're just from all over. That was a lot of fun to see.
What is the size of the team that puts together ROSCon?
The size of the team, well, it's, you know, it's broken out into sort of committees, right? So we have the executive committee that's sort of doing the main planning. We have the you know, the review committee, right, that's going through and looking at all the talks, looking at the talks. That's like reviews, I want to say, is fairly large, like 3-4 dozen people. Executive
Wow.
committees, you know, like 8. We do have an event planning staff that we work with. Their name's Meet Green. They're generally pretty awesome, and they've helped put together all of the ROSCons that, for at least as long as I've been here, 3 or 4 years. And they, like, you know, they're just amazing. Like, they, like, when COVID hit and we had to pivot from like an actual conference to a virtual conference, they just like were on it and had some of the best recommendations. They're really wonderful people. Yeah, and so, you know, all these people are coming together, put stuff together, and that doesn't include, you know, the people that are putting in their time to put together workshops, to put together talks.
Right. Right.
Um, it's a big group effort. So
Yeah.
I ordinarily wouldn't take like shots of the outside of the conference center, but in Kyoto, everyone was taking photos of it. It was the place where they signed the climate accords. It's just this crazy building that looks like something. It looks like Starfleet Academy, quite frankly. And just beautiful grounds. I had my partner with me. If you guys want something cool that is not ROSCon, my partner was with me. He took a bunch of photos. This is actually off one of the Apple QuickTime, the first digital camera ever offered by Apple. So he's actually been working on there's this resurgence in like vintage digital cameras. To actually put together an Instagram clone, basically for vintage digital cameras called 640 by 480. So if you want to see some of these shots, it's kind of interesting to look back at how, you know, how much digital photography has changed. Because I remember when I was really young in like high school, these things, no one had them, or like there'd be like the school district would have one.
Yeah, like a Mavica with the floppy disk thing. Like, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, and it's just interesting to like look at the image quality. But that's a shot he took of the outside of the conference center. Really was just an absolutely gorgeous facility. So first day of ROSCon, we actually had the workshop. So we had 3 workshops. I would say one was on OpenRMF. I think one was on ROS2 control. And a third one was on Mini Pupper. And then we had ROSCon Japan. And ROSCon Japan was, you know, I think this is probably the 7th or 8th year that we've had ROSCon Japan, and they, you know, co-located the event. But, you know, the point of ROSCon is to be a Japanese language event, but we had real-time translators at the event. So you could walk in and go to this conference that's all in Japanese and put on a little headset and listen in English. It was really quite amazing. So like I walked in at one point just to check on everything, and there was a panel going on about like startups in Japan. That's Yuki, who's one of the new Open Robotics board members, but she's the CEO of RT Corporation. It was really interesting. RT is apparently doing all of the food service robots for Japanese rail. I thought that was pretty interesting. She had some pretty interesting perspectives.
That is interesting. The rail culture is much different there than like the US. For folks that aren't aware, like
It's amazing.
you can just hop on a train and basically go wherever you want, like one end of the country to the other, just on a whim. It's really neat.
Oh yeah, you could go. Everyone, or at least I flew into Tokyo, which is a good, I want to say 200-300 miles away, and got to Kyoto. No problem. You just get on the train. You're there. Train's going 400 kilometers an hour or something like that. Just amazing. You don't even feel it. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of the ROSCon talks, the things that I thought were cool and things I think are relevant. And I have to be perfectly honest here. I am paraphrasing other people's talks, and I am not gonna go do them justice at all. And so the best thing you can do, and I put basically links to all the videos and all the recordings of ROSCon, and you can just go watch them. They're short links, so you can type them in right away. So I just want to make sure it's clear that, like, credit to the original authors here, amazing stuff. And I'm paraphrasing as best I can. So just be aware, I will almost certainly screw some stuff up, but I'll give you the gist of what I saw. And so if you want to go see all these videos, they're up for free on roscon.ros.org. They're always have been free, so you can go look back at almost 10 years of ROSCon, and all of the talks are online for free. And that's just sort of a resource that we provide for the community. Okay, write this down really quick. It's really simple, roscon.ros.org. That's where all the stuff is.
I'll drop the link in the chat for everybody.
Yeah.
Too lazy to type themselves. I got you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so one talk, so this is an interesting one. This is actually something we've been working on in ROS1, and it's not, this was sort of the talk summarizing everything. And it was a discussion of basically a new ROS rep. So kind of like, if you're familiar with like PEPs, which are Python extension proposals. So we have ROS extension proposals, which is basically, it's kind of like a standard. We have different rules about what it takes to get to a rep. So there's been this rep published for basically HRI, human robot interaction. And why I think this is relevant is it covers a lot of the input used for HRI comes from computer vision. So there's stuff like, all of these, if you build a better person tracker, you end up with this question of, hey, I've got all of these joints in a human, right? And they're moving around. I want to track those joints and relay them in a standard way. And the reason you want to do this, right, is that you might have like, human detector A, human detector B, human detector C, and you want to see how well they perform. You all want the output of all those things to be similar. And so basically what this rep does is it kind of iterates through all of the different representations of people that you're going to want. So like, a representation of a human, like where are the frames for every part of a person? Like how do we define, this joint and this joint and this joint? And that's really important for representing a human in a space that the robot can follow. So there was human bodies, but there's a lot of other things like, tracking individuals and multiple people in a video frame, recording conversations between people, gaze direction, all of those sort of things. If you're working in that space of like computer vision where you're tracking people and looking at people, this is really defining a set of like how you want to structure the output data that's as it comes out to get it into ROS in a way that's sort of uniform. And so this is a fairly new rep. I think we accepted it for draft, I want to say a few months ago. And this is all coming out of PAL Robotics, which I think we saw somebody from Spain. This is a Spanish robotics company. And they basically have gone through and done all these things to make, to build these standards that you can basically plug in one of these computer vision algorithms, get the output, and then build other things on top of it. What else I got? So this one was, yeah, this was crazy. I think this was the keynote on day one. And it was a talk about, they're basically using ROS for like robotic liver surgery. And this
sounds like a lost Dead Kennedys album.
Robotic liver surgery.
Yeah.
And so if I recall, and again, go watch the talk because I may kind of, get this roughly correct. I'm paraphrasing here, but what they would do is they, if you say have liver cancer, liver problems, you go in, they do like a CAT scan or MRI and say there's a tumor sitting on your liver. And they do the CAT scan and they can like do the 3D reconstruction of the liver or, other organ. But generally that reconstruction is, it's a rigid model, right? You basically get it. You get the 3D reconstruction of the MRI as like a single shot, right? So you don't, and the liver's actually squishy. It moves around once you go in there and try to do surgery. So what they were really trying to do is to take live video from a surgery, build a model of that live video and try to basically register it both rigidly and non-rigidly onto the liver, right? So that you could say like, hey, we took this MRI, we're pretty sure, here's the tumor area that you're going to want to remove. And here's that tumor area circumscribed on the actual tissue in real time and go display it for either, for doing robotic surgery. So you kind of have a good, crazy, like the non-rigid reconstruction registration is just still, I'm maybe not up on the literature anymore, but it is still a very, very difficult problem. And, I don't think we really have the math quite yet to do it well. Like the assumption in computer vision always is that like the thing you're picking up is a rigid body. And, most of robotics kind of lies on that. When you get into squishy stuff, it becomes a harder problem. And so this is just interesting because it's still researchy, but it's applied research and it's touching on all these sort of computer vision disciplines that are still, deep research. But if we can crack that nut of say rigid to non-rigid registration, we can start doing some really, really cool stuff.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. So this one's cool. I flowchart's not that interesting, but it's this atom calibration framework. And so what it is like if you've ever worked on a robot that's got multiple computer vision cameras, right? They're all pointing in different directions. You have to figure out the transforms between all the cameras, do the get the camera extrinsic, get the camera intrinsic matrices, and that whole calibration process is kind of, it's messy, right? It's basically that surface where you're going from, hey, all the math checks out, everything's easy to do, to the real world. And that's where all the slop in a system kind of comes in. And so any robot that I've ever worked with required this sort of deep calibration problem. And it really, we talk about the like 80-20 rule, which is like, it's, 20% of the work will take 80% of your time. This is the 20% of the work that'll take 80% of your time is getting good calibration. And so this talk is just basically about a framework for doing all of this in a reasonable fashion and all the tooling that's needed to make that happen. And they actually have some charts here about like we went and built these systems, calibrated them, and then came up with error metrics of how they performed, and includes OpenCV stereo calibration, right? And they kind of go through and say like, hey, on these different data sets with these different calibration routines, these are the general performance of these systems. And this is big. There's, if I've learned anything sort of being an engineer for long enough now, it's these kind of, to be honest, kind of boring-ish problems, these really hard problems that people kind of punt on all the time, that really make the difference between a good product and a bad product, and having to do that kind of work to get there. And so this is just cool. Now there's this big open source package for doing, camera calibration. I think there's also some LiDAR calibration in there. So that's going to save people a lot of time and just generally provide for better robotic systems. So this one's cool. My colleagues over at Picnic Robotics, they build Move It. So if you're not familiar with ROS that much, Move It is basically the framework for doing inverse and forward kinematics on like multi-joint arms. Mm-hmm. And so they worked with this company called Optimax to build ARM systems for polishing super high-end optics. So the tagline for Optimax apparently, or the thing that one of the people said in the talk is like, if it has optics in space, it probably was made by Optimax. So these are the people building the optics for satellites, right? We could guess it maybe some of the fancier imaging satellites that have gone up that probably contain these optics. And what they did is they took well, first, I think Picnic built a ROS interface to an ABB robot. They used ROS2 control, and they basically came up with this very, very slick, fancy control system for grinding down these optics and smoothing them out. So, this is a tool pathing problem. So you have to get this, multi-axis arm to go smoothly over this path along the optic that's all curved and strange and clear, right? Difficult to calibrate to or use computer vision on, and get the arm to go over these paths and really just grind everything down in a smooth way to get a very high surface finish for these optics. And they kind of just walk you through, why they're doing this and what it looks like and how they actually got there. And so this is cool. This is some of the highest end manufacturing you're going to find out there.
Wow.
Yeah, really, really, like no margin for error on these things. It's wild how precise they have to be.
Yeah. Space stuff is interesting because it's hard, it's expensive, so you can do some crazy stuff. Other thing that we have at ROSCon, and if you're working on something you think is relevant, you're going to be there, but you don't have time to put together a full talk, we have lightning talks. And we're at the point where I think we put up an hour every day just for people to come in like one by one and do 2-minute lightning talks. And so there's too many of them to talk about, but I picked out a few. And I think the thing to say, like, if you're going to watch one video and you just want a spread of all the cool stuff in ROS, just go watch these lightning talks. Sit down for 45 minutes and it's like watching TikTok, right? It's like 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. It's like super duper nerdy TikTok. It's just like next. But we had talks from Apex AI, who are sort of building one of the first like safety certified vehicle autonomy systems, and they were talking about their perception pipeline in ROS2 and how they got it to be, so this problem when you're moving, you have this, autonomous vehicle that's got, I don't know, 8-10 cameras on it, plus some LiDAR, plus a bunch of other things. You're moving a ton of data through these systems. And if you sit there in memory and copy all these images over and over again in your software, it's going to be too slow. You can't, you have to basically take an image in, and then as you're writing your code to process it, what you want to do is basically pass a pointer around and only, allocate or move that data once or as few times as possible. So they had a good lightning talk about doing zero copy and their perception pipeline. There was this other one from the University of Turku where they just basically went and bought every LiDAR that works with ROS, right? And they put them all in a rig and went and put together basically a comparison, like a data set of all these different LiDAR. And this is definitely, something, again, it's one of these things that's like really boring, but really kind of important, right? So if you're a professional engineer, you're building a robot, you have like, the proliferation of LiDAR companies in the past like 5 years has been nuts. There's like more, it used to be like, well, there was Velodyne and maybe like a couple other tiny companies. And now there's like 10 different companies, or probably more than that, at least a dozen different companies. They all have their own, there's like the flash LiDAR people and the conventional LiDAR people.
And also the application domain has expanded so much, right? It's not just one kind of LiDAR you want. You want it in very small form factor sometimes.
Low power.
Or like short throw, long throw, like, power concerns. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just like you're looking at basically the spread of beams, the number of beams, the sampling frequency, some of there's parameters about like the reflectance and other things you can kind of tease out a LiDAR. But anyway, he took them and he put them, basically went through and did this calibration, or not calibration, but benchmarking procedure for all of them and published that data. So like if you're an engineer sitting there and your boss is like, okay, we got to buy a LiDAR, which LiDAR should we buy? And you have to figure out which one. You can actually go look at this data. It's like consumer reports for LiDAR data. Let's see,
like
other
that.
ones. Speaking of LiDAR, Robotech, which I think is a Polish robotics company. They basically released a GPU acceleration for rendering LiDAR data, because generally LiDAR produces a massive amount of data. So you like basically need a GPU to render it, and they've released some tooling for that.
They
And then
might want to be on the lookout for a cease and desist from Funimation Corp.
what's Funimation Corp?
Robotech is a famous anime space opera from the 70s. Yeah.
Cool.
It's with an H though. It's with an H. That's what their logo is though. It's the same logo as the anime. So.
Maybe it's related. Okay, and then the last lightning talk. This was basically the short of it is it was the weirdest thing. I wish it wasn't a lightning talk because I really want to know more. Magnetic tentacles for robotic bronchoscopy. I hopefully said that right. All right, I got a video of that. So my
You
understanding,
had me at magnetic tentacles.
yeah. So my understanding from watching the video is that you're doing like somebody has lung cancer or something, and they want to remove these tiny tumors or do a biopsy, and it's got to get your lungs are basically this crazy fractal thing where there's lots of little turns and uh, you know movements in to get to the place that you want to be in the lung, right? If you're going to go through somebody's airway to get into their lung versus cutting in through the side. And they have this like weird magnetic robot, and they like thread it in through your airway. Sorry, I might sneeze here. And then they use like a bunch of like magnets on robot arms to make the thing move. So it's like this passive robot that they're threading in. I would imagine, I don't know if they're using ROS just to move the data around to get the control signals back, or if they're using like say Gazebo to do a simulation of what's going to happen. But this is just crazy, futuristic, interesting, this very early research stuff that just looks really, really interesting and cool.
I wonder if they were inspired by those kids that supposedly ate some buckyballs.
Oh, didn't they recall those?
They did. You can't buy them anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, you can buy magnets, so but they can't sell them as toys anymore.
We're not allowed to call them fun.
Magnets were one of my favorite toys as a kid. Like hands down, I just had this like thing full of magnets. It's just too many good things. If you know a child that's not going to swallow them, buy them a bunch of like nice magnets, but not too big. Okay, side story. My uncle gave me like neodymium magnets from like hard drives or like Navy hard drives that he found somewhere in the 90s. And these things were like snapped together, like crush your finger level.
Break a finger. Yeah.
Don't do that either.
Mm-hmm.
So
I knew a guy that had an MRI magnet actually.
What?
Sorry, go ahead.
You had these lightning talks every day, 1 hour and 2 minutes each?
Yeah, like 2 minutes each, and just like 30 people, 25 people, just like nice. You'll see in one, I did one of them and I just have this list, and it's like, we don't have a buzzer, but we should have a buzzer where it's like, you get 2 minutes.
Or like one of those big hooks from the vaudeville days you can yank people off stage with.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's a good form. And the other thing is like, because normally you're like writing a talk for a conference and it just like sucks up all of your time, and everything's got to be perfect, and it's it's not bad, but it takes a lot of time, and the work's kind of got to be finished. And lightning talks, you can just like, we're in the middle of something, but here's what's going on. If this interests you, what's cool is that you're like, here's what we're working on. If this interests you, come talk to us and we can chat about it. And just finding people that have similar interest. I think it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, like if you know what you're talking about, you can wing 2 minutes. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like TikTok. Yeah, and then there were a bunch of them about agricultural robotics is a huge growing field right now, and they're I think there was a couple, at least one, if not two, sort of agriculture research groups at universities coming in and showing their latest work, which is really interesting, high power sort of computer vision stuff, right? Where you have these like indoor, I think this is peppers or tomatoes or strawberries or something, and you have to basically drive this robot down this greenhouse and figure out where all the peppers are, and then figure out like their orientation, whether they're ripe, if they're diseased, and then grab them.
It's very big. In fact, one of our friends, FarmNG,
I was talking to Gary the other. Oh wait, Gary's working on something too, right?
Yeah. Gary's working. Gary Bradsky, who's the founder of OpenCV, he's also working on this with a company called FarmNG, and they are doing agricultural robotics. It's fascinating, and if you have used orb features, ever in OpenCV. Ethan Rubley is the primary author, is the first author of orb features. And FarmNG is his company, right? He's the founder of the company. They're doing very good stuff.
Yeah, there's a ton of it south of San Francisco and Monterey. So let's see, I kind of moved on to second day here. So this was a talk from researchers at Penn about basically GPS denied drone navigation. For basically perception, you figure out where the robot is, its state estimation is, like say its pitch, yaw, roll, and position, and all the things that are in front of you and whether you can navigate. And the hardware that they basically use to get this done. And the videos and stuff out of this talk are absolutely amazing. Like, I think at the end of the talk, he said that like they have drones navigating outdoors in a forest autonomously from point A to point B with zero GPS, just vision, and going through these super duper complex environments. I think this was the first day keynote. This one's definitely worth watching. A really, really impressive work.
Man,
so I know of another company.
That drone would have totally just aced all of the folks in Star Wars, The planet Endor would have been a smoking crater if this drone technology was available to the Empire.
Yeah, they can do space travel, but they can't have an autonomous drone drive through trees. Crazy.
So I know another company, I can't name them, but their drones can fly 100 miles without GPS. They fly higher, not at this level, and you can imagine the application.
Is this Oh, and all this, the thing I forgot to mention, all this code is also open, so you can see how they're doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Why are they calling it GPS denied? I mean, does the word denied mean something specific, or it is?
My understanding from my days long ago as a defense contractor is GPS was never quite meant to be a consumer technology, but they kind of the military gave it away, and kind of assumed that if things were really going poorly, they'd turn it off.
Right.
B, like there's a lot of people there's ways to spoof it and mess with it.
Yeah.
Or, God knows with all the stuff going on in space, if people were to say, take out a few GPS satellites.
Right.
And there's also areas where it's not allowed, like you're just not allowed to engage it. So that's also a thing.
Yeah. So military stuff for sure. But the flip side, the other thing to think about with this is there are other places where there isn't GPS, i.e. like the moon or Mars and stuff. So we need to it is something that we would need to be solved before we do space robotics, right?
Yeah.
Like hopefully eventually we'll have tons of robots on other planets. They'll have to go do stuff and they won't have GPS and they'll still have to figure out how to get around.
Yeah, the first time I learned about how these people land things on the vision system that lands things on, let's say, lunar surfaces, I was shocked because they use I don't want to call it primitive, but
maybe rudimentary would be a better phrase.
Traditional computer vision techniques and things like that, and they also use pictures from before. I was thinking that lunar surface it is exposed to the to asteroids and whatnot, and it doesn't have an atmosphere, so it must be actually pretty pretty much, changing a lot.
Dynamic, yeah.
A pretty
Yeah.
malleable surface.
But that's
Yeah.
actually not true. It's, you can take a picture from 5 years, 10 years back, and it still is able to register, and you are able to use very simple image registration to land things on moon based on just photos that were pretty old.
Yeah,
I
like
was
all the
pretty surprised.
footsteps from the people that walked on the moon are still there.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That's true.
Okay, so here I know I said if you watch one talk, like you should, watch this one, but this was a 10-minute talk. It was just perfect. It was called 2020 Robot Vision. And this is like kind of a pet peeve of mine, especially with like junior engineers come in and like they're so used to like phone cameras, right? And like on a phone camera, like you can change a bunch of settings, but no one ever does, basically.
Yeah, autofocus and auto white balance and
yeah, but when you're doing like manufacturing tasks or like science tasks, you're going to go buy a machine vision camera, and these things aren't auto. You have to go and set them. So this was just introduction to one of the ROS packages for industrial cameras. And he just kind of goes step by step through all of the different parameters, things like, gain, area of exposure, white balance, pixel formats, like all of the things you have to care about when you buy an expensive industrial camera, and that you have to go figure out and set for your working environment.
Well, the SDKs there are SDKs which you have to pay for like $500 a year for one seat, just so you can use these machine vision cameras and get a picture in your software, right? So you have to actually pay for these SDKs, which are $500 a year. Just ridiculous, but there exists a market for that.
Yeah, and so the auto stuff is like different, but this just kind of walks you through. Like if you don't know these things, you should go learn like what is the gain? Like how do I set exposure, like area of exposure, like white balancing, all those sort of things that people don't know when they're starting out that are really important to understand, like what makes a good image and how you get to a good image. Part of this might be that we just don't teach like traditional photography anymore. So this is I'd highly, it's 10 minutes. Like it's just a good refresher. It was just beautifully, perfectly executed. My personal favorite was Turtlebot 4. So when we built the Turtlebot 4, we worked with ClearPath Robotics up in Canada, and they did a short talk about how they actually got the Turtlebot together during the pandemic with a component shortage and all of the steps involved in testing it, putting it together, getting it certified for domestic market, all of the different steps that are required to basically build a Turtlebot and make a consumer robot. And ClearPath is one of the best at making robots that you can just go out and buy and they work, and tons of people use it, and so they have a ton of experience. And it's one of these talks where you just go and hear about the experience of somebody who's just one of the best at building robotics applications for like a mass market.
Are there like competitions, etc., for high school students that uses Turtlebot?
There are high school, no, a lot of universities will buy, like, even when I was at university, right? A lot of universities will buy like 6, 8, 10 of them for a class. And then every student gets one, and you'll do something like, going through a maze or some other challenge. And that's generally where we see. I mean, there are, but it's not for high school generally. It's usually more like early college. Let's see what else I got. Oh, this one. So if you're interested in SLAM, there was a talk by Steve Masinski, who wrote the Nav2 library, just talking about all of the different planners that you can use inside of Nav2. And so and how this relates to computer vision is that if you're interested in SLAM and the application of SLAM, this is a really good primer on just like different planners that you can use once you have a map built of an area. And so this is just a really good tutorial on how how these systems are put together and what components are in them and how you can use them. And so if you're interested more in like, oh, I really want to do like computer vision for SLAM and path planning and 3D, a little bit of 3D reconstruction, this is sort of a great introduction of the things that are built right on top of that, the sort of downstream applications that come from there. Couple more real quick. We had a couple talks on basically food robotics from in Japan. So another huge and growing sort of robotics domain are these food robots. Basically, there's one, what are they called? Nestle, I think. There's one here in San Francisco, right? You go to the food cart place, and it's not quite a food cart. It's like a shipping container, and you press a button on one side, and food comes out the other side. So this was a group in Japan that's basically doing this for a couple different locations inside of Japan. And there's all these weird problems that you have to solve when you're doing food robotics, right? Like by and large, like it's kind of understandable. It's like you take the ingredients, you do the thing to the ingredients, and then you put it on a plate. But like things like picking up soft items.
Maybe they should collaborate with the liver people.
Yeah, maybe.
There you
go. Exactly.
I want some tentacle prepared ramen.
Yeah, and there's other people doing other approaches here in the state. I'm trying to think of what there's a startup here that's I think working with like White Castle and a few other chains in America, and I think they mainly just do like the burger and fry automation. But this is a huge growing field right now of just robotics. There's a lot of computer vision going on, and this is just kind of a walkthrough of like all the steps involved in the problems they're solving and what that looks like. Yeah, I got a few more, and it's just kind of like random cool stuff. So was not a talk, but you're just walking around ROSCon and you run into people that are like building robots in Central Europe. So this is a LEO rover. This is a, IPC rated rover that you can pick up for, I think, a couple grand. And it's just like you're walking around, people have got their robots and you can talk about what's going on with their robots. Oh, another little ClearPath announcement. They are open sourcing all the hardware. The software has already been open source for a long time, but they're open sourcing all of the hardware for the PR2 robot, which was the sort of, yeah.
That's super cool.
Yep. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah, especially coming from the Open Source Hardware Association. So if you're interested in how a robot like this is put together, that is all coming, I think, shortly. So that was a big announcement at the end of ROSCon. Oh, so I moved. So the thing is, we had ROSCon, and then like 2 days later, there was IROS, which is the academic conference. So I tossed a couple videos because I wasn't working. Well, I was working the ClearPath booth, but I was there, so I got to. And I wasn't running around trying to make the conference happen, so I got some more time to kind of talk to people. There was a basically shelf stocking robot competition for 7-Eleven at IROS. So all these students were coming in with their various robots trying to like stock these Japanese 7-Eleven shelves. That was quite interesting. I'd be remiss if I didn't show you guys a bunch of cool robots too.
Is there a robot sensitive enough to properly pour a Slurpee?
I don't.
You gotta get it all the way to the top. It's like it's a real delicate operation.
Well, you got to mix flavors too. You got to have at least two flavors.
Depends. It depends on what they got. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like Coke and cherry, and you're like, this is not.
If that's all you got, that's all you got. It's.
I'm actually surprised how 7-Eleven has a computer vision group, right? They actually built something like an Amazon Go. They were trying. I don't know what the state is right now, but it is surprising how many of these companies who we don't think about computer vision or robotics companies, they are very much into it, right? I mean, even Lowe's has a very big computer vision automation robotics group for their warehouse management.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, you will end up in any industry running across these problems, and they're usually tough problems to solve. Yeah, so this is a cool one. This is a product. I want to say they're out of London, and it's I think it's Shadow Robotics, but they have these basically robotic fingers that have touch sense, and it runs all in ROS at like 10,000 hertz. And what you can see here is like basically he's touching this thing over here on the left, and you're seeing the pressure vectors. So you get both like the amount of force and the direction of the force on these fingers, and they're
That's
working
really cool.
like basically human hand that has all these
17
sensors.
directional
I think there's
Wow.
17 on there. So this is like, I'm sure these things are super expensive now, but give it 5 years, they're going to get cheaper, they're going to get more accessible. And like a huge unsolved problem in robotics, it's just how to pick stuff up without breaking it, right? Like robot doesn't, unless it has a sensor, it doesn't really know if it picks something up. It can't feel, your sense of touch. And that's how we operate. And so this is really, as these things kind of evolve and become more available, it's really going to revolutionize robotics. What else do I got? So this one's cool. This is a US company, and it's just called Hello Robot. And it's easy, and I don't mean this disparagingly, it's like a two-step up Turtlebot, where it's a mobile base, camera, and this like really cool little arm that's got a fairly decent payload capacity. And they just raised a few $1 million, I think, and they're finding that these robots can be super helpful for people with disabilities, right? Or that are like mobility impaired, that you could put this in your house and like, hey, I need, if you're, if you can't really get up and move around, you can't like go to the kitchen and get yourself a drink. You can't go and like pick up the mail on the other side of the house and bring it to you. So they're really looking into how they can use these for these sorts of tasks, right? These mobility or, helping tasks for people with mobility impairment. So these are super cool robots.
Yeah, and like, I mean, in our business, the type-in business, a lot of folks when they get older, for example, can't grip like they used to. Just even simple things like that. I think these are huge game changers in terms of quality of life just for everybody at some point.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's still research phase, but this is cool stuff, and this is built to not be insanely expensive. What else do I got? Okay, so I think I got two more. This one's nuts. So it's similar to the hand idea. I think this is Honda research, and this is similar to the hand I showed you earlier, where it's got touch sensing and it's this complex robotic hand. But what's interesting is this one also has fingernails. And so they had this really slick demo using ROS of this hand, basically figuring out, and I'll fast forward it here real quickly, figuring out how to open a can automatically with this like robot fingernail and this touch sensitivity. You can see the touch vectors over here.
Man, we're gonna look back on this as the time when we really lost the war with machines, when we made it so they could drink Red Bull.
Yes, exactly. I drank that Red Bull. It hit the spot. It was a long day.
I was actually surprised. Honda had one of the first few humanoid robots way back.
Yeah, the bipedal robots.
Asimo?
Yeah. Asimo. Yeah. So Asimo, and then they kind of lost their way with that, right? They did not go the Boston Dynamics way. They did not push the technology far enough for it to be
it seems like it kind of ran out of steam after a while.
Yeah.
I don't know, research is expensive, and if there's no business outcomes, it's kind of like that tends to happen. Let's see. I got one more. So this is for Phil. This is this was, I forget which group this is, but it was a mobile robot group.
Oh my God.
And it's playing an automaton.
Oh my God.
So I was working in the booth, like a couple booths away and it was going the entire time. If you don't know what this is an automaton. Wow. This is a crazy little Japanese instrument that just makes the most cute, annoying sound you can ever imagine. And it's got a little mouth. And so basically you press the top and it makes different noises, and then you can kind of like shape notes with the mouth. Yeah,
it's kind of between a saxophone and like almost a marimba kind of thing, because you're just manipulating with your fingers. So it's really, that's incredible. I'm glad that was not spoiled for me. Thank you for the robot playing music.
All right, and so let's see, we're getting close to time here. Just a couple of things. If you want to go, a couple events coming up. Open Hardware Summit, So I'm also on the board of the Open Hardware Association. This is in New York City. So if you're on the East Coast, this is just a bunch of people doing stuff with the open hardware. There will be some cameras. It's a really, really, really great event. It's quite affordable to go as well. So if you want to join us there, that's going on. We got finally, ROSCon this year will be October 18th and the 20th in New Orleans. Finally, we've been trying to have an event in New Orleans for 3 years. It's finally happening. There should be more information out in the next couple months about how to submit your papers and like what ticket prices will look like and that sort of thing. But we should, we're having ROSCon again this year, and it's going to be in the US.
I'm really worried about this one. I know that I'm going to go and I'm going to come back with a very expensive guitar.
Uh-oh. Well, it's almost as bad in Japan because Japanese guitars, man, amazing. There's also going to be a ROSCon JP this year. So this is the old logo, but there's going to be one for 23. I don't know if the post is in Japanese, so I'm not quite sure on the location. I want to say this is in July or no, wait, I think this is in September. And then there's also going to be ROSCon France in Bordeaux. And that's going to be like roughly the 4th and the 5th. Posts about both of these are on ROS Discourse. So if you're calling in from, somewhere in Western Europe or in, Asia Pacific, there's going to be a ROSCon event near you, and it hopefully will be in a language you speak. Yeah, I mean, I got a bunch of filler stuff, but like that's the short of it if we have extra time. But I think you guys got some stuff to do too, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
Very cool. Was the Nerf Slam video there? Yeah,
dude.
Man, Nerf is really taken off.
Yeah, I pulled out some cool stuff, but then I go look at the source code, and Jeff Powers is on the commit list. I'm like, he just changed, he cleaned up a file or something like that. He didn't write it, but I was like, oh, I know this person.
That's funny. Yeah. Good morning, Jeff, if you're watching. If you're joining us for the first time, or if you just need a reminder, one of the things we do every single week here on OpenCV Weekly is a giveaway to you in the audience. You will be answering a trivia question based on the talk today with the opportunity to win the OpenCV course of your choosing. You can go to opencv.org/courses to see what courses are available. The first person to answer the trivia question I asked correctly in the Zoom chat will win the course of their choosing. If you have won in the last couple of months, please don't answer and give other people a chance to answer. So this episode was just all about ROSCon 2022. There were quite a lot of attendees from different countries. 800 attendees from how many different countries? How many different countries? Oh, Johnny Lee was just right out of the box with that one. Hokey Smokes Bullwinkle. All right. Congratulations, Johnny. Send one email to phil@opencv.org with the course you would like. The answer we were looking for was 38. That is 38 countries, 800 attendees from 38 countries. Congratulations, Johnny. Send an email and we'll get you your course. Gosh. Yeah, we got some interesting questions from folks. First of all, people want to know, can we share your slides with folks as part of the YouTube upload later, Kat? I think you're muted there.
Sorry about that. I was typing in the chat. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And every, the slides are there. There's just pictures, but just go to roscon.ros.org. It's all there. The slides for the talks are there. The videos are there. The summaries are there. So my slides are just a guide to what's actually from the event.
So we had a question from YouTube. This is one that I was interested to know as well, is a little bit behind the scenes information on how early do you start planning for a ROSCon event? Like how long does it take to put something this big together?
To give you an idea, we have our first meeting next week for ROSCon 2023, and it's in late October.
Okay.
Makes sense.
And I'll be honest, we reserved the location a year ago or longer. So
it seems like the longest lead thing is making sure the venue is locked down and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
You got to do that a few months out, or quite a few months out.
Speaking of events, you'll have the chance to meet me and probably also Satya at Embedded Vision Summit this year. It's May 22nd, I believe. Come say hi. Well, OpenCV will have a booth there. We'll be cracking wise and talking computer vision. Satya, we got any announcements this week from your side?
Announcements. Let's see. Not really. I mean, we have already announced the competition winners, etc. And people who have not checked out, they should go and check out OpenCV AI competition winners. That webinar was very helpful. Went over a few winners.
Yeah, really, really awesome videos from the winners. We'll be uploading all of those winners videos to our YouTube channel as well. So you can kind of go through the list and see all of the people who won honors this year. We're working on the next competition. If you want to be a part of that, you should go to opencv.org/subscribe and sign up for the OpenCV newsletter. We'll let everybody know there first when things happen, like contests, competitions, chances to win things, etc. Man, Mario just told me it's 10 o'clock. I guess, Satya, you want to go ahead and take us home here?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kat. It was a pleasure. As always, you bring so much value to the webinar. And this one was fascinating. I've been thinking all through the webinar, how can we put together OpenCV conference someday? This is really fascinating stuff. All the things that happened at ROSCon. Really thankful that you came on here and,
better see you guys there this year because it's in the US. It's not that hard.
All right.
Yeah, I'll be there for sure. I'll be in Nolans for ROSCon for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I also want to thank Phil for putting the show together, and thank you so much to all our audience. It's a pleasure to have you here week after week. I really appreciate your presence here. Thank you.
Absolutely. We wouldn't do these shows if you didn't watch them. Join us again next week, same bat time, same bat channel, Thursday at 9 a.m., wherever you're watching. Thank you for joining us and have a great day wherever you may be.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of the webinar. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to tap the little bell icon to be notified when new episodes drop. This week's episode was brought to you by OpenCV Courses. Learn computer vision and AI from the best at opencv.org/courses. If you'd like to be in the audience next week, subscribe to the OpenCV newsletter.